welcome to our events at Run and Become. We're extremely delighted and happy to have a great panel of speakers at this event. Our compere for the evening, Nick Anderson, a great coach, GB coach, will be introducing our guests in further detail very soon. But I'd just like to put out a very special welcome to Jo Pavey, who was our guest speaker a couple of years ago at Run and Become, actually when we could do pre-pandemic days, when we could do events at our shop. As you can see behind me, she came to the shop and inspired a whole group of people there, and that was just a great event. So very, very delighted to have Jo back, as well as Naomi and Rachel to join us for the first time. That's also great. So I'm going to hand over from Nick. A big thanks for you all, to you all for joining us. Big thanks to all our guests from Run and Become. And Nick, I'll hand over to you to introduce our guests. Thank you.
Thank you, Saradiva. And well, welcome everybody, and welcome to the Run and Become Saucony and Polar. I guess we're going to call it a training night, workshop, whatever we want really. You've got whatever you want with this esteemed panel of guests you can ask tonight. I'm sure they're all wonderful. But let's before we do an intro, can I just bring in actually Kirsty first from Polar, and then Gareth, I'll get you to follow up from Saucony. Just perhaps to say hi and any quick updates from the world of tech and also shoes and clothing. Kirsty first.
Thanks, Nick. Hi, guys. Firstly, thank you for joining us this evening. We obviously have a wealth of experience and knowledge in the room tonight, so please make sure that you ask all those questions and make sure that you benefit from the event tonight. Previously, they've really worked well when we get most interaction from you. So, fire away. Myself and Gareth will be hanging around from a brand point of view to answer any tech questions as well. If you've got anything to do with watches, not just Polar, we will forgive you if you're wearing other devices, but we will be around. Thank you to Run and Become as well for putting on this event. It's been a hard year for everybody training, and hopefully we're coming out of the pandemic now, and you can all start planning again for races again. A little bit about Polar. So we were the first ones to bring out the heart rate monitor around 40 years ago. We've kind of evolved the market over the last 40 years, and in kind of the latest year we've been launching numerous products, which I'm not going to bore you all with now, but there is lots of exciting things, new features. Our latest watches is the new Ignite 2 and the Vantage M2, and tonight we've actually got a prize to win the Vantage M2 as well, which is exciting. As Nick is going along talking about training and anything tech related, he can bring me in and I'll talk around the features and how it can assist you in your training. Thank you.
Kirsty, fantastic. Thank you. Gareth.
Thanks, Nick. So I'm Gareth from Saucony. Look after the marketing for UK and Ireland, which means look after everything from athletes to product messaging to retailers, including obviously events like this, which when we last did it with Nick, it was great. Found it very motivational, and I hope everybody else finds the same thing. We had people emailing saying, I was going to have a rest day tomorrow, and I went out instead. I went running instead, and I actually realised I did have to get on with my London Marathon training, and I didn't actually have another week off available to me. So I hope everyone finds this as inspirational as the previous time. Product wise, we're obviously being led by Endorphin series. The new one in 2 weeks is the Endorphin Trail that Nick's been secretly given a pair of early production, and he's going to be testing it, but he's not allowed to say anything because it's obviously a secret until launch date. And the other big shoe launch coming up is Triumph 19. So there's always something happening. We've always got products coming out. So I'm hanging around for if there's any product queries, and also to give out some of the prizes at the end.
Gareth, thank you. And I've got them on now, I promise you.
Good man.
They're under the table so you can't see. Okay, so look, we've got three fantastic guests. This is in no specific order. It's just as I've written things down. I know these three very well, and I think you're in for a fantastic time. type away with your questions in the chat if you have any questions, and Sahadeva or myself will notice them and then read them out as we go along. And I'm sure any question will be a great question. So look, without further ado, welcome to Jo Pavey. Now, if you've been living in another universe, you won't know that Jo Pavey has been to 5 Olympic Games, is European 10,000 meter champion. She won't mind me saying this, at the incredible age of 40. She's won bronze medals in World Championships, silver and bronze at Commonwealth Games, has been in multiple World Cross Country and European Cross Country teams, has medaled there as well. She's been one of our great female athletes for the sport over the last 20 odd years. And Jo, thank you very much for joining us once again this evening.
Thanks so much. Lovely to be here. Thanks everyone for joining in. Looking forward to it.
Now, hot on her heels, she hopes, is Naomi Mitchell, who's right at the other end of her running career, but has gone from being outside 3 hours for the marathon, originally started doing some other events in the sport as well, which I'm sure she'd be embarrassed about and might allude to, and has progressed over the years in quite a short period of time to run well under 3 hours, then run 2:37, and last year you may have noticed her running in the London Marathon when they went round and round Green Park. She was the second British girl home and ran 2 hours 33, so very much on an upward trajectory, and I'm sure we'll give you some great tips tonight. So Naomi, welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Okay, and then, this is great for you tonight, and I think super exciting in terms of another area of the sport, but also, and I hope I say this politely, a bit of reality as well, which is fantastic. We've got Dr. Rachel Cullen, who is, and this is her own words, a runner, writer, solar-powered mother. So we're going to come on to that maybe, and of course an author, and currently writing a new book as well, but author of Running for My Life and The Midlife, or a Midlife Cyclist. So we're going to really chat to Rachel a lot tonight about sort of the mental strategies and dealing with mental health, and some of the projects that are out there and ongoing in the world as well. So you've got a real balance tonight with your career in front of you. But just so you know, Rachel has run a very good marathon time, a real marathon time of 3 hours 16, and has ambitions to get closer to 3 hours. So that's kind of where we're at with our panel this evening. Now, look, to get them going and to warm them up, because you can't do anything without a warm up, I've decided we're going to do 10 quick fire questions. Okay, and the guys have got to quickly answer these. No messing around. I don't want too much of these ums. Let's just go for it. So here we go. Ladies, cat or dog? Jo Pavey, cat or dog? Dog. Naomi?
Yeah.
Dog.
Dog. Rachel?
Cat.
Cat. So you're getting to know these guys now. Okay. If you switched on the telly and had to watch sport over the last few days, and I've missed out some sports here because it's been fantastic, and you're not allowed to choose the Olympic trials, because that probably would have been where you'd have gone. Tour de France, Wimbledon, or football? Jo?
Oh, that's tricky, isn't it? It depends who's playing, isn't it? I'd watch England play football. I'd watch Andy Murray play tennis. Don't know. Yeah.
Patriotic.
Depends.
We're going there. I get it.
Yeah.
Naomi?
Football all day long.
All day long football. Rachel?
Tour de France.
Tour de France. There you go.
Yeah.
3 different answers. Love it. Okay. Mountains or the beach? Rachel first this time. Mountains. Or the beach? Mountains.
Yeah.
Naomi?
Mountains.
Mountains. Jo?
Oh, it depends. I'll say the beach, but I like to run in mountains. I don't know. Depends if you want to go in the sea or not, doesn't it?
This is Jo's nightmare, because she wants to do everything all of the time. You're starting to work this out. Okay. And she lives in Cornwall, so she's got to say beach at some point. Devon, sorry.
Yeah,
nearly. Okay. 10K or marathon? That's going to be interesting for at least one of you here. 10K or marathon? Rachel?
Oh, marathon any day.
Marathon. Naomi?
Marathon.
Marathon. Jo?
Probably 10K, but I do like the marathon, but it's a long way, isn't it? Yep.
Still wanted both there. She wanted both. Not a bad CV for both, I have to say. Okay. Wine, beer, or a brew? Wine, beer, or a brew? Naomi?
None of them.
So wouldn't even have a brew. Okay, water, we'll assume. Okay. Rachel?
Beer.
Beer. Jo?
Red wine.
Red wine. There you go. Three
Yeah.
different answers. Like it. Your favorite meal? I don't want a whole menu, just your favorite go-to meal. Jo?
Curry, but not before a race.
I'm pleased you said that. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Curry, but not before a race. Rachel?
Pan-fried salmon with some rice, but that's not been made by me. It's been made by my husband. That's a critical point.
Okay. Okay. Read into that what you want, guys, but fantastic. Good. Naomi?
Vegan sushi.
Vegan sushi. There's a clue there, which might lead to some questions this evening. Excellent. Well done. Would you stretch or would you roll? Jo?
Probably stretch if I had to do one or the other.
It's a very unfair question. Naomi?
Well, I think.
Okay, good. Rachel?
I think I've been just guilty of doing neither of the above, so I don't think I'm in any place to say to choose, because I think for the past 10 years I've done neither, and that's probably why I'm where I am, where the other two ladies are where they are, plus genetic differences.
Top tip, get on with it and do both of those, and it will really help, I reckon.
Noted.
Okay, favorite film. We're on number 8 here. Favorite film. You're not allowed to mess around. Come on, favorite film. I don't mind how bad it is. Favorite film. Naomi?
Brighton Rock.
Brighton Rock. Can you turn your volume up just a fraction, Naomi? That would be great.
I
Jo?
put my headphones in.
Jo?
I mean, anything funny. I mean, I can't think of one really. I mean, something old like Zoolander's quite funny, isn't it?
That would do.
Really.
Fantastic.
Can't think of
Comedy.
it.
Good, good. Rachel?
Yeah, there's no shame filter on here, is there? So I'm going to
No.
go for Hairspray.
Why not? Why not? Okay, there's no shame filter, but this is going out.
Yeah,
to
he's out there
millions.
now.
Okay.
He's out there now. There we go.
Okay, your hero in the world of sport. Jo?
Oh, me, right. I mean, loads in the running world. I mean, obviously, Liz McColgan winning that 10,000 meters. Kelly Holmes always helped me out at the start of my career, giving me advice and stuff when I was new on the team. Steve Cram. Yeah, Brendan. I don't know. There's loads. It's hard to pick one, isn't it?
It is. There was 4 there though, but that was good. You got them in. Naomi, hero in sport.
First race I remember watching is Kelly Holmes, Athens 2004. So I'd have to say that, I think.
Don't you hate people that are that young? Isn't that unfair? Right. Okay, well done, Naomi. Rachel.
Yeah, and I'm just going to go totally left field here. I remember watching Steffi Graf, nothing to do with running at all.
Brilliant.
But actually, Steffi Graf, just because she was a workhorse and she delivered every single time, and I loved watching her. She was brilliant.
Brilliant, and took women's sport forward as well.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, so final question. It's wet outside. It's 1 degree. There's a howling gale. So it's really freezing. It's a typical day in Yorkshire, probably. Would you go on the treadmill or would you run outside? Rachel?
This isn't even a theoretical. This is an actual. What do you do in this? It's in that circumstance. Run outside.
Brilliant. Jo?
Yeah, run outside. Just get on with it. I reckon. Enjoy it.
Someone said just a normal day in Edinburgh as well. Naomi?
Yeah, outside, definitely.
Okay, so these ladies are hardcore. You now realise that. Okay, so I hope that's given you just a little bit of quirky background. You've got 3 super guests tonight, and I think what we ought to do to start with is just to ask each of them a little bit about what they've been up to recently. I think that would be really good. So, Jo, do you want to just tell us what you've perhaps been up to a little bit, perhaps in the last months of the pandemic and what's going on at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, if I go right back to last March, before the pandemic began, I was training hard, been to the track all winter, and was a week away from my first race, and was really hoping to try and hit some good times on the track. And then with the pandemic, I found myself not being able to use a track, couldn't get any access at all for over a year. And then also with the delights of homeschooling that I think other people probably relate to. You know, I lost a bit of form, picked up a bit of a niggle, but now, you know, picking up the track training again. I've been working away at it. I've been down the track trying to get down there quite regularly. I did a 5K, which I didn't do a great time, but I thought, well, it's a start. It's something to work off. I haven't been able to run maybe the times that I was hoping to run, but I think with all the circumstances, it's just been a bit tricky. But I just still love it. I love getting down the track, trying to hit targets. I love racing and competing and stuff. So I'm planning to do another 5K this month and also a road 10K. But yeah, love it. And I love getting out in beautiful scenery as well. I just love all the different aspects of running. So I'll keep going, even though I'm getting older every day. So maybe that's one of the problems, but still loving it.
Can I very politely ask you how old you are now, Jo?
Well, I'm 47, but I'm nearly 48. I'll be 48 in September. So maybe I'm not in my prime now. I don't know.
Well, you're still super ambitious in that, and it's wonderful to hear. And I hope that in itself is an inspiration. Rachel, what have you been up to?
Yes, so I guess the main thing, and I guess one of the things that I want to talk about tonight that I've been up to that brings together my involvement with Saucony and Polar, I guess, is I'm writing a third book. And that's on the back of me sharing my experiences in my book, Running for My Life. A lot of people got in touch with me and said, oh, your story sounds so similar to mine. There are many aspects that so many of us have in common, the reasons why we run. A lot of that's to do with mental health, and certainly around the pandemic and things, that it just became really apparent that a lot of these stories need sharing. So for the past few months, I've been collating those stories. Unbelievable, you know, everyday heroes that you see out in the streets and in the parks running around, and we've got no idea what the real reason is for their running. So my big thing, my sort of big driver for the past few months has been to kind of collate those stories, and we're in the process of writing that book now. In terms of my running, which, you know, I can't believe I've even nudged onto this panel to talk about my running here, but let's go for it and throw that out there. It's not really happening at the moment. We've got a few issues to deal with, a bit of low iron and some other things not working out, but it's still my goal to run in London this year, and I do want to qualify for Boston again. I'd be going back for the second time, but I haven't given up on that. It's 12 weeks to get myself in shape and be there. I would like to get another sub 3:30 at London. So I haven't, although things aren't working out just at the moment, I haven't quite given up on that being a prospect for October.
Fantastic. And we're going to chat to you a little bit more about Run for Good in just a short while as well, because it's a fantastic project. Naomi, what have you been up to?
Firstly, I hope you can hear me a bit better with these.
We can.
Yeah. Sorry, my laptop's getting a bit old. Yeah, similar to Jo, actually. I think I only remember running on a track once in 2020, maybe. So just been really enjoying these last few months of getting on to go on a track or getting to do some more speed work. So just finished what would it have been, a 8-10 week speed block, finishing yesterday, and now heading into marathon training. So yeah, had a year of just training kind of at home. Me and my husband, he was furloughed for most of the year, so became my training partner pretty much. So I'm just really happy to be getting back down to club nights and group training, that kind of thing, as we look to London.
And then just to all three of you, really, as we all look forward to maybe July the 19th or whenever it's going to be, when things unlock even further, and races really do come back. I mean, there's races going on now, but events really start to come back. Is there anything that you've done in lockdown and throughout the pandemic that you kind of feel you're going to take forwards with you now? Things that have changed, any areas that you've had a chance to maybe reflect on, or new skills you've learned? Rachel, can I come to you first on that? Yeah,
I think from a personal perspective, I think I've learned to really appreciate running, strip away the races. And, you know, when you're talking about, you know, I'm an everyday runner, so although I've got a vast collection of kind of races that I've done, and all those, you know, a lot of years of you know, going and putting yourself on the start line, I think being devoid of that it's kind of made me rethink what running means to me and kind of just appreciate and value it for the other things it brings. And it's helped me so much personally, like Jo mentioned, during homeschooling, just to get out for an hour's run on a day when you've been otherwise incarcerated with a child or with kids, without any idea how to kind of deal with that, and you know, no kind of guide how to do that. I think just I've really learned to value running and see it, strip away all the other paraphernalia and just love it for its own sake.
Brilliant. Jo, yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I really agree with what Rachel's saying, that it really makes you appreciate running all the more, you know, being able to get out and run during the pandemic, and you just really appreciate your running. I mean, you do miss being able to be sort of actually meeting up with other runners at events and that all that running community things that we absolutely love, even though it's been great online as well. We miss sort of meeting up with other runners, and it makes you realise how much you appreciate it. I suppose during the pandemic, I was pleased to get involved with lots of campaigns, which, you know, obviously Rachel's an expert in, with about mental health and that. And a lot of the campaigns I was involved with was about mental health and keeping active during the pandemic and how it can benefit that. And I enjoyed getting involved in all those sort of campaigns, and that was a really sort of great thing to get involved with. And yeah, so I suppose I got sort of more knowledge of that, and also workouts for children at home. I got involved in that, did some videos with my kids and tried to come up with exercises that you could do with children in a small space. We made like ladders out of some bamboos in the garden and things like that, and sort of bearing in mind that even though we were lucky that we have got a bit of a garden, that maybe some people were, you know, maybe living in a tower block and they wouldn't have a space to go out. And so some of the exercises we did were, you know, bearing that in mind, that it needs to be accessible to everybody. And that was really sort of rewarding to get involved with. So yeah, and some of the running challenges as well. You know, Saucony had a running challenge that I did, and yeah, there was lots of things. And did I think I did a gym workout for some of the Saucony employees as well, which was fun for me because I'm not used to leading a gym workout, which was probably quite obvious with my not very skillful way of doing the exercises. But yeah, there was lots of things to get involved with. So yeah, I agree. It was a chance to pick up new skills as well as appreciate how much you love your running.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jo. And Naomi, for you've alluded to your husband being on furlough. For you, I know you were working from home, and on top of that, you're entering races that are forever being pushed back or cancelled. I mean, how did it sort of go for you?
Yeah, well, I think because I spent most of the summer not having an entry to the race I ended up doing in London, so it was a real kind of spring and summer of working on my weaknesses, I guess, and like doing a lot of strength work and speed work, and then starting that marathon build in the hope that I would get the place that fortunately I did. But yeah, I think in general, having a desk job where I work from home, where I work on the computer a lot, I think lockdown really helped me get out more during the day and move more during the day, which was really beneficial to my training, even if I was still sessioning in the evening, just moving about more. Other things that I think I gained from lockdown were things like doing my sessions on grass, because I didn't have access to a track at the time, and I found that really beneficial because actually it really helps with recovery, and it is quite tough, so you get quite strong doing your reps on the grass. So there were a few tweaks to training which actually we've kind of I say we, you being my coach, we've taken forward for this year to carry on. So yeah, there's lots of good things to take from it.
Brilliant. Okay, guys. Just so moving forwards then, and looking on, I'm bringing you in here, Rachel. Really, the Run for Good campaign's kind of taken off. Where's this all going to go, and how, going backwards, did we kind of get into this running for my life story as well, and speaking to the world so openly, because you're very open about everything, and then it's really obvious in your books about you know, how you felt, your journey, and how you relate to things.
Yeah, God, there's a lot There's a lot there, Nick. I'm just wondering where to begin. Where did I bring where did Saucony kind of, where did I hoodwink you into this, Gareth? Is I think that's the, is that the question, or is it kind of what made me so open about my story in the first place?
First of all, because I think
Okay.
other people have then listened to that and bought into it. So how did that come about for you, first of all?
Yeah, so it was in the Bath before the London Marathon 2015, and I was kind of in a place where, you know, I'm with Naomi and Jo on the panel, you've got to put this into some context, but, you know, for me to have, the autumn before, I'd got my PB of 3:16, and bearing in mind that I came from a background of being really inactive, physically, you know, really struggling with weight issues, mental health issues. I wasn't coming from even a base of decent fitness. So to have kind of pulled myself to a place where I was expecting to run a half decent time for an amateur kind of, you know, club runner, I guess. And I think it was at that time that people were perhaps making judgments and kind of saying to me, oh, well, it'll be easy for you because, you know, silly things like you look like a runner, which is right, without any consideration of the journey that I'd been on for the past 15 years to kind of run, you know, with some degree of confidence, you know, in a club, and to kind of get the times that I was never imagining that I would be able to achieve on a very kind of amateur level. And I kind of wanted to, I guess, give an insight into the real journey that had happened, that, you know, it wasn't just that I was putting myself on the start line of what then was my 4th London Marathon, from this place of, oh, it's going to be easier for you than for the other, you know, than for the vast majority of other non-professional runners that are putting themselves out there. That's just not the truth. And I'd run my first marathon in 2011 when my daughter was 7 months old, and in the 3 years since, I'd kind of taken an hour and a half off my marathon time from 4:25 to 3:16. And I guess I wanted to share the journey of, you know, really where that came from. And it was so much about the mental health aspect of things. And it was in the Bath before that marathon when, like I said, there was this kind of perception perhaps of it somehow not being it being an easier thing for me to access than other people. And I just wanted to share the backstory and a little bit of the reality, and perhaps make people be a little more open-minded about maybe judging others who put themselves kind of out there. You know, maybe they haven't always found it easy, maybe they weren't naturally athletic, maybe they had to work really hard for that, and maybe there are other mental health aspects going on behind the scenes. And that's kind of where the idea and the very first words were written on that day before the London Marathon in that bathtub, and that's kind of where it began.
I mean, who do you think engages with the books, Rachel? Who do you think reads them and really benefits?
It's really surprised me, first of all, the number of people whose stories resonate with mine, and it's men and women. You know, I receive you know, people share a lot. Sometimes it'll be a little paragraph, sometimes they'll tell me the life story. It's kind of, there are certain parts of my journey, I don't really know what it is, but perhaps, you know, I've had a mum who suffered from mental health illness. Other people have been brought up with parents who struggled with mental health, for example. I had weight problems, comfort eating, kind of isolation as a teen, not really knowing where I fit in. I've spent 12 years on mental health medication in a career that didn't work for me. Perhaps that's something people can relate to. So I think there are certain chapters, and it's a horrible euphemism for someone who writes books, but there's certain chapters of my life that seem to resonate with people. And perhaps it is more women than men, but surprisingly just a huge range of people who, we may not have the same journey, we may not have been on the same journey, but we've had the same experiences, if that makes sense. And I think that's what's become apparent from 3 years ago, me sharing a story in the pages of a book. We don't have to have lived the same story to have the things in common. That's become really clear to me. I hope that's some kind of answer.
Very good. And just the book you're writing at the moment, without giving too much away, but also given a bit of a tease, that does kind of overlap a little bit into what you've just said, really, doesn't it?
Oh, completely. The idea came to me because of these the incredible and moving messages that I've been receiving over the past 3 years, and it still happens now. People feel compelled to kind of reach out and say, yeah, thank you for sharing your story. This is what my experience has been, and actually it felt like it was they impact on me so much. I wanted to do something with those stories. I've had the opportunity to talk about what I've been through, and you know, at times that's been difficult, but in terms of wanting to talk about other people's experiences now and kind of saying, right, you know, what are the things that we have in common? Why is it that running's helped us so much? You know, what is it that brings our stories together and we kind of bond over this thing? And it feels like I describe it as a spider silk that kind of pulls people together, and you don't really know what that is. And it's kind of exploring that and sharing some of these other stories that, for me as a writer, as someone who, I love storytelling, that's what I love to hear. I love hearing stories and I love writing them. And I think to be able to do that and get some of these stories that I've heard out there is a great thing.
Thank you, Rachel. Jo, you've been involved in the sport for many years. It's really a high pressure business, staying at the top for a long, long time. And it is tough. And there's a lot of times when there can be self-doubt. And there's a lot of times when at the same time, there's huge ups, and it's fantastic. Has the last 18 months given you a chance to reflect a bit more on that? And kind of, I'm just thinking here about what Rachel said as well, and your own journey. And I know you've got a passion for this area as well, and the whole Run for Good campaign.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, I've been able to sort of think how lucky I've been to have all the experiences I've had, but also how lucky I am to be a runner, and how we all benefit from the running community, and how we all support each other, and how, you know, running is so brilliant for mental health. You know, it's not just good for physical health, it's good for boosting mental health. And that's become more and more important, and especially with the problems people have had during the pandemic. And yeah, that's become much more in the public eye, how beneficial it is running, you know, for your mental health, and what it can do, you know, to positively impact mental health. And I think that's been a good thing. And yeah, I suppose when I look back at my career, I've been fortunate to have been to 5 Olympics and to pick up some medals at championships. And I think sometimes when I think, you know, when I probably did my best race, it was kind of when I was juggling everything, but I had that balance in my life. And that's almost to do with mental health as well, because when I was a younger athlete, maybe I did run some slightly quicker times, but you know, the stress and pressure on yourself when you go down the track, even for a training session, you know, you're kind of quite daunted about it all day. Sometimes you want it to go well and everything. And then when I found myself in a situation where I was a busy mum coming back from having my second child, I trained really hard when I went down the track. And often, you know, we'd all be there together. The kids would be playing in the middle of the track and I'd be training. And I tried really, really hard in my sessions, but I couldn't dwell on it. I couldn't just think about running, even though I still loved it and I put all my effort into it. I think, you know, when you talk about the stresses and the stress on the mental side of things, probably that balance and juggling things actually did me a lot of good, and it led me to probably doing my best race at a time when I wouldn't have expected it, really.
So just on that very point, because it's on my list of questions here, 4 laps to go, 10,000 meters. You know what, I've asked you this before. Zurich, you know, suddenly in with a shout here. There's a medal to be won, but you don't know what color it could be. What on earth is going through your mind as you're running around, 4 laps to go in that 10,000 meters? Did you believe you could win it, or did you just focus on the next lap and the next lap? What was going through your mind at that time?
I mean, without going back too far, I think it was all just a very surprising year. I mean, at the start of the year, I thought maybe I could just try and make the British team just one more time, but I thought it was probably unlikely. And then having to do the trials, I'd only stopped breastfeeding a month before the trial, and the trial was early. It was on May the 10th, which is pretty early for a summer trial. So got myself in the team by winning the trial, and that was probably the start of it. In some ways, that was probably the most unlikely bit, that I would be able to run and get a position in that trial. So did that, and then it was the Commonwealth Games, which was the 5,000. That was only 10 days before that European Championship. So I hadn't done any sort of real top class international races particularly, and I hadn't done any races of that nature since I was coming back from having a baby. And I got a bronze medal in that, but it was like real cat and mouse race running against the Kenyans. It was like in any of the distance races, could anyone beat one of the Kenyans? And they were like running almost like a team, and I'd try and overtake them, they'd overtake me. And then the last lap I tried to get ahead at the bell, because I thought, well, I'm not going to come from behind and out sprint them all, so I just thought I'm going to get into the lead at the bell and see where it took me. And I managed to get the bronze medal, and that told me that I was maybe in better shape going into that 10,000 meters than I would have expected. But you know, this was now, I had to race double the distance. Obviously most of the athletes in the race hadn't done the Commonwealth Games, and they just focused on that. And then got people come out of the woodwork, if you know what I mean. There's always that sort of unexpected situation. And yeah, so it was a very busy race. There was about 27 people running around in a tight circle. There was a lot of getting spiked, not knowing whether to run wide or run on the curb, and your automatic situations to think, oh, I'll run by the curb for the first few laps, keep economical. But actually I couldn't stride out. You're cutting your stride, and that's quite tiring. You can't let your leg flow because it's going to hit the person in front. So I was running a bit wide because the pace was slow in the early stages. And with 4 laps to go, I suppose, you know, if I answer your question, I was thinking, do I start making a move? But, you know, that's still a fairly long way out. You know, it's still longer than 1,500 meters, isn't it? When you think about it like that as a whole race. And I kind of bided my time a little bit. But when I was thinking about pushing the pace, the Portuguese athletes just suddenly did it. So I went with that, and trying to conserve energy for most of the race, trying to keep relaxed and controlled. And then the race kicked off and just went with it. And then I suppose I thought about my tactics that I'd used at the Commonwealth Games. So I tried to get into the lead just going into the bell, so that I wouldn't be trying to fight round the athletes at the end. But I was more nervous than anyone else when I went into that last lap. You know, you think people must be nervous watching it, like friends and family and stuff. I was probably more nervous, even though I was actually in the race, just thinking, right, I need to do a controlled last lap, because you don't want to push too much too hard. So I pushed around, went down the back straight, and then tried to kick and kick again. But when I crossed the line, I think only put my hands halfway up, because I thought, no, surely I haven't won. This doesn't happen to me. You know, I was like, didn't want to be embarrassing, like over celebrating and then getting it wrong. But yeah, I just couldn't believe it. It was totally when I didn't expect it, because I'd been an athlete for many years, never won a gold medal in a championship race like that. And you know, it did make it more special to have my 2 children and my husband and, you know, parents in the stadium. And it definitely made it more special. And it taught me about not giving up on your dreams. But also, when there's obstacles and you think it's really difficult, then sometimes you can find a way if you know, you're flexible with your training, you prioritize the important aspects of training, and most of all, you've got that balance and you're just loving it and enjoying it. And I think that's what led me to run better than I had before. But yeah, I was over 40, so I got the double-barreled name Jo Pavey 40. Definitely, I had a new name that year. It's like I was always, but I like the banter. I got a lot of banter from my teammates who call me Granny and stuff like that, and I didn't mind that. I found that all good fun, and they inspired me with their young enthusiasm, so it was all good.
But it certainly inspired a lot of people who thought their days were perhaps going to be longer or slower to keep going and do what they've done. So well done once again. We're going to chat more about training in just a short while. So please, if you've got any questions about training, do fire away. There's 1 or 2 questions coming in, which we'll come to in just a second. Naomi, just bringing you in, you've been on the journey where, you know, your first marathon was X, and now you've arrived a couple of years later and you're running 2:33. What was your time for your first marathon? And What on earth would have gone through your mind if someone had said to you a few years later, you'll be running 2 hours 33?
So my first marathon was actually 2:54. My slowest marathon is 3:01, which was the pretty hot one at London a couple of years back. Yeah, I mean, that 2:54, if anything, was one of my one of the races I was most enjoyed running, because my target was about 3:15, and once I knew I was going to run sub 3, even though I was absolutely at the wall and had nothing left for the last couple of miles, I knew I was going to do sub 3. So it's probably one of my most enjoyable runs, because I could just enjoy running down the Mall and finishing the race. Yeah, following that, I did have quite a run of I guess very similar times in the marathon, and I really I always felt like I had the sub 2:40 in me, and in all my training, like I would say to my husband and the people closest around me, like I was going to run that time. And so I don't think I ever would have. I've never looked to like a sub 2:40 or sub 2:30 as like completely crazy to think about. I think for me, I've always you got to have like a bit of confidence in yourself of what you may be capable of in order to move forward, and to really have the motivation to get up and run. And I think so, yeah, really it was more about the kind of few years where it wasn't happening for me, just persevering and going for it, more so than, you know, that 2:37, it's maybe to an outsider came out of nowhere as like a 10-minute jump from my previous the one kind of a year before. But I think for me, it was about proving to everybody else what I thought I was capable of. So it was just a case of keeping on working really until it all eventually came together. And I still think that now, like I ran a 2:37 in Frankfurt, which I couldn't have been happier with. And then a year later, I did a 2:37 at the Olympic trials, which I was pretty devastated with. So there's always that next step and next thing to go for, really. Got to enjoy the journey as you go. Otherwise, you'll always just be looking to the next thing.
But that last line is very interesting, enjoying the journey as you go, because Matt Newnham's put in a great question here, which is, I think, really aimed at all runners. And that is, you know, we can all take it very seriously. And we're often wrestling with the demons that appear on our shoulders, either during training or when we're on our own, reviewing our training, or perhaps the worst thing of all, looking at everybody else's training. So how do the three of you kind of deal with the demons that might be on your shoulder? And, you know, how do you manage to enjoy your experience, I hope, or at least get everything into perspective? Rachel first, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I really struggled with this actually. And again, I think I understand now that I think it's something that a lot of runners go through. It wasn't just me, but whilst my times were getting faster in it, and you know, I was kind of on this an upward trajectory, and I won a Breville juicer and a bottle of wine at 120-mile road race. And those moments you think, oh my God, you know, for me, I'm the first woman across this finishing line of a 20-mile road race. On what planet is that even a thing? But what happened with me is, I think really I began to attach my self-worth to the kind of times I was getting, and it became a constant pressure to do more and more and faster, and remembering as well that ultimately no one actually cared. I'm not a professional athlete. No one really was actually bothered, but in my mind it was a really big thing to kind of keep on that trajectory, and for it to not do that.
Do you think it can become a bit of an addiction? Do you think there's days when you go out the door and you're running because, you know, you've got to go for another run, you can't possibly have a day off?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the case. And I think the real difficulty for me was that I began to evaluate my performance with my worth, which sounds like a huge statement. It's a very big thing to kind of say, I guess, because what does that mean, that if your running falls apart that you do? But I think that's really the point. I let it become this great big thing that, and I lost the joy for a little while with that. And one of the things that I did back in 2017 when that happened was I came off Strava. Because I was so fed up of kind of, oh, someone's taken that crown and these segments and all of that stuff. I still use Strava as a tool to monitor and manage my own training, but I just decided to step away from the constant comparison to so-and-so's done 200 miles this week, so-and-so's done certain elevation. Actually, it doesn't matter. And I had to kind of leave it because I was getting too wrapped up in things that really weren't important. And so that was one way that I kind of decided to just balance things for my own mental well-being.
Brilliant. Jo, did you ever worry about, or do you ever worry about how other people are running? Does a gremlin ever get on your shoulder and start telling you things you don't want to hear, or do you worry about competitors? How have you coped with that?
I suppose in the prime of my career, I know that you just need to focus on your own training, and as you go through your career, you gain experience. You know what sessions work for you. You know what you're doing in training, how that relates to what race shape you're in, and you kind of know, like if you're doing K reps off 3 minutes, what they need to be in, or if you're doing them off 1 minute, what they need to be in. And then if you're doing block of 400s, you kind of know if you've got a short recovery, they've got to be in that, and you kind of know, right, okay, that's good, that means that it relates to that shape I'm in. So you can only focus on your own performance. Of course, if you're going into a race, if it was a championship type race, you might think about what your own strengths and weaknesses are. If you know that you haven't got a blistering kick over the last 200 and you are racing people that have, of course it's good to have some tactical awareness. And of course, going into a race, you need to know the lap times, or if you're doing a longer race like a marathon, you need to have those miles, but so that not only do you know how you're getting on but what's going on, you've got that awareness of what's happening tactically in the race. So yeah, you do have to in a way sort of look at what other people are doing, but you stand on that start line, you just know that you've prepared the best that you can. And sometimes when I stand on that start line during my career, I kind of have that moment of calm, because it's been, a big sort of effort to put in all the sessions during the weeks, trying to make the right decisions. Like you talk about the ups and downs along the way, things go wrong, you get niggles, and you're trying to work out, right, do I do this session today or not? And you're trying to gauge like the preparation races you don't have to be a championship race, it can be like for anybody, if they're aiming for a marathon or half marathon, the thing that you're really aiming for, and all the other things are like mini goals along the way type thing. So you stand on that start line and you kind of have that almost calm, because all you've got to do now is race. All the training is done, you've done all the preparation you can, and now the only thing you've got to do is race. And you've got to kind of think of it as an opportunity rather than something you're dreading. You think, right, this is an opportunity now where I could try my hardest and maybe get a performance that I'm pleased with. And I think mentally, if it goes wrong, yeah, obviously it's, there is disappointment, but you have to take a step back and think, right, what have I learned from this? Why did it not go well? Was it to do with the taper? Was I not able to get in the shape I wanted to get in? And you think of reasons how you can move forward and make those improvements going on to your next race, and just think, right, we're not machines. There will be good races and bad races, and it's the learning process, and there are going to be highs and lows for anybody as a runner as far as actual performance. But you've always just got to be pleased to be able to do it, be doing it in the first place. I always think, it's like it's sport at the end of the day, and you're just lucky to be doing it, really.
So it's very clear that experience is a big thing with this as well, and you learn so much along the way. But in terms of recovery and knowing when you're tired, I think it'd be really interesting to hear from the three of you, because there's so many runners that can flog themselves day after day and go out the door and run, but when you actually ask them why they're running, they may not always give you a very good answer for that. So I'm interested. Naomi, I'm going to ask you to go first. How do you know if you're tired? Do you look at data? Do you listen to your body? How do you know?
That's a good question. I mean, there are obviously data indicators like checking your heart rate on an easy run. If you're feeling quite tired and you notice your heart rate's maybe 5 or 10 beats up, then you think, oh, is there a cold coming, or am I a bit overtired here? But to be honest, I can just tell normally. I know what I feel like on an easy run. I know what I feel like in a session. And that being said, like an easy run for me could have a whole range of paces. It could be like a 6:45 or a 7:45 mile on an easy run, but you know when you're overtired, I think, and it's time to take a day or switch some sessions around. I think it's just about being honest with yourself and knowing that, particularly if you're looking at a marathon, that your build, you shouldn't kind of have a 12-week everything set out ready to go plan, and if you miss a day, you've ruined your build up. You need to take things like a day at a time or a few days at a time and reassess as you go. I think it's just it gets quite obvious as it creeps into your work, and you start getting a bit more stressed with the people around you and that kind of thing.
So are you
obvious.
happy to take a day or two of extra, well, a couple of days of easy runs, or take an extra day off if you need it? Do you find that easy, or do you find that hard, the addictive part of that?
I find it hard, but it's almost like when you have a session that's hard, it's tough to get yourself mentally in the zone to go and do that session. Equally, it's hard to take a day off if you need it, but they're both key components of succeeding in running. So you kind of have to train hard and recover hard. So it is a kind of force yourself to do it sometimes. It's not straightforward, but it's the best thing to be done if you need it.
Jo, you're coached by your husband, and have been for many years, and it's been obviously a great partnership. How do you, I mean, are you working off a plan? Are you looking at things day by day? What do you do if you're tired? And you've got the kids as well, so there's so many different variables hitting you all the time here.
I think leading into the performances that I was pleased with when we had the kids and everything, it was very much a juggling act. So I think it helped me having my husband as a coach, because obviously all coaches are brilliant, but I think for me it actually enabled me to be more flexible with my training. Like sometimes we'd be trying to go to the track and we end up down the track 3 hours later than planned, and it would have been tricky for me to do that if I was ruining other people's plans for the day. But because it was just us as a family, we would get there in the end and get to the track and get the training done, and then we could be more flexible like on a daily basis, I think. And really it kind of worked. I mean, it was enjoyable working towards goals together as well. That's a really nice thing. But definitely the flexibility and being able to have that opportunity to like really listen to my body and think, right, okay, maybe I need to put off the track session a day, or sometimes during the session, it can work the other way around with track sessions. You can be thinking, right, okay, I always tended to get the bog standard like speed endurance type work done, or the endurance reps, and then the speed work is like kind of icing on the cake, the real sort of full out 200s and that you wouldn't risk if you've got a niggle. And so you have to think, right, okay, can I do another interval? No, I think I need to sort of call it a day there. But he would always be the one to kind of hold me back rather than push me forward, because I just loved it and I really wanted to try and do as well as I can.
How does that go when he says you've got to finish now and you want to carry on?
Yeah, I suppose it was funny. One thing, it was funny. I always show this example where before we had children, one time he really annoyed me because I was running really badly, because he used to pacemake me a lot before we had kids. Like my early races when I got my PBs and stuff, he would be pacemaking me. And one time I was running really badly in a session, so he started like smacking his own bum in front of me, meaning keep up, like this isn't like I'm not, but not in a horrible way, but it was like just made me feel really annoyed, because it's like I'm trying as hard as I can. But no, he's really supportive, and he's not a hard taskmaster, and it's more sort of holding me back. And he's over the years looked at pace charts, and we've worked out what we need to achieve in each session according to what recovery we're having and things like that. But yeah, it's definitely good that we can make those decisions on a very sort of regular basis about training and how it goes forward, and then race plans and working out which races are going to fit in the lead up to a championship and things like that. But yeah, it has been good. I think as I kind of achieved, my goals whilst, we had young children, I was coming back from having a baby. I think for me personally, it kind of helped with the flexibility of that. But of course, not to say that, other coaches are all just absolutely amazing. But for me, I think it did help when I was coming back from having a baby to have that extra flexibility in that respect, I think.
Rachel, you're working with Polar a little bit at the moment, which is fantastic. I'm going to put you under pressure, I guess, here, but you're starting to do a bit with data now. You're starting to do a little bit more with perhaps looking at areas in terms of energy or tiredness more so than you would have done, particularly because you've had one or two things you're trying to sort out at the moment. How have you found that, kind of bringing in the sports science element on the wrist?
Yeah, I found that really one thing I really wasn't able to do very well at all, if at all, for a period of a few years, was to listen to my body and to know when to not push through and when to have a rest day and things. And that's really not, I didn't have a running coach at the time. I was just kind of doing the most stupid thing, which is just more and harder and faster and kind of all the things that the two ladies on the panel would know not to do. So I think it's really helped me to be able to understand and look at the data. I do use my heart rate. I'm very aware of what feels normal on an average run. Again, for the faster sessions, I know where it should be, and when it isn't there, I'm able to rely on something that's more than my own judgment, which I think I lost a bit of confidence in that after having a few years where I just ploughed through everything regardless of how it felt. One example being running a few days after the 2014 Yorkshire Marathon, flying to Barcelona and running 50 miles on what felt like broken legs. It was the most stupid thing to do because my muscles just hadn't recovered from that marathon. And I remember the feeling now of my legs just feeling like they were made of glass, and knowing it was kind of not the right thing to be running on them, certainly not that kind of mileage, but somehow not being able to stop, somehow not being able to not do that. So I think I've had to kind of learn the hard way and been able to access advice from running coaches, people who really know what they're talking about, and learning about the data, and becoming more confident with using that and interpreting it and kind of managing that with my own running schedule. That has helped. And nowadays, I'm no spring chicken. I'm 43 now, so it is easier for me to do other things instead. So I do a lot of yoga and body balance, that kind of stuff, and I'm happy to do that because I feel like it doesn't just deplete me on the days when I believe running would. Sometimes I can feel like the strength I gain more from doing other things sometimes than I would from doing the running. So I've kind of had to learn that, just going the long way around.
Perfect. Sahadiva, we've got a couple of questions on the outside of the chat. I think you're on mute at the moment.
Oh, sorry about that. Did you not see the Q&A, Nick? Do you have that button?
So I've got a question here. Is what kind of other activities? Is that what you're referring to?
No, we have a few from the Q&A. We have for all. Do shoot check heart rate.
I've now seen it. I do apologize, everybody.
Okay. Fantastic.
Okay. So let's deal with a few of the questions on here then. So for all, do you check your heart rate via the watch, chest strap, or another method? And is there any reasoning behind it? So Jo, I'm going to bring you in because I'm going to be a bit cheeky here. You've been running for many years, and I think we all, those of us who've been running a long time, remember taking our pulse all the time from the wrist and so on. But are you using heart rate at all in your training now, and sort of using a device? And do you find that useful?
Yeah, I think I find it very useful, particularly when I was getting ready for marathon training. I'd say I mostly would use a chest strap with a heart rate monitor. Interestingly, with the way the watches now with the GPS, you can have obviously the pace you're running. That has been really useful, because when the monitors first came out, of course, there was no GPS. So I was very much using it as a tool to work out how hard I thought I was working, because I was almost using it as when I was marathon training, thinking, right, I want to keep my heart rate at this pace for an hour when I was doing my long sort of tempo runs and things like that. Whereas now I do use heart rate and think about zones and everything, but I'm also thinking, I know what paces I want to hit, because that's, and I quite often will use the watches in that way, thinking, right, I want to do that minute miling. And then, I might look at the heart rate, but it's kind of both, isn't it? You can choose between the two. And I think a lot of my career, where I've been focused on particularly 5K on a track, I just know that obviously there's nowhere to hide on a track. You've got to do the 800s or the 400s or K reps in those times. So you're kind of trying to hit that while you're in those sessions. But then it's useful to be able to use heart rate for tempo running, and particularly I think when you're aiming for longer races like half marathon and marathon.
Brilliant, I agree fully. Naomi, there's a great question here from Stuart, which is asking you about the jump in your marathon time, and really, was there anything that particularly supported this gain in performance? But I'm wondering if you also want to, within that, allude to any sort of sports science that you use, data, any technology at the same time.
I mean, there's a whole range of things, really. I think in terms of my lifestyle, when I first started marathon running, I was still doing my accountancy exams, and also doing quite a lot of commuting, working away from home as well. So my jump did kind of come in the year following finishing those exams and working more locally. So I guess the change in that, the kind of quieting down in that side of my life, gave me the opportunity to think about marathon training a little more. But in terms of the actual things that I did that I think have been most beneficial, probably I guess three things really. One is my strength and conditioning. So I have a place here that I go to a couple of times a week with a different coach to running, that gives me some like running specific base exercises, and that's just really helped with like robustness and ability to recover well from training hard, which has been very useful. Secondly, I'd say is my sessions. So I kind of switched up from doing a lot of slow, easy long running to incorporating a lot more marathon specific pacing, or even quicker in my long runs, just to get used to that pace and that feeling, and also used to fueling at the speed that I would be running, and a kind of race day prep, I guess. And then the third thing would be moving to like a marathon specific coach. So I've had two coaches that have helped me with the marathon, one being Robert Redding, and then now Nick. And I just think if you don't have a coach, or at least someone that can help you with a plan, you do tend to just do the things that you like to do, so the kind of sessions that you enjoy. And there's a lot of things that you need to add into your training that maybe is not what you would pick, like for me, I guess hill reps and the speed work and stuff, which has hugely helped me pre my marathon block, whereas previously I'd kind of almost just kind of tick along in anticipation of that marathon block beginning, because that's what I really enjoy. So yeah, the marathon specific sessions, the S&C, and someone, a coach or something that can help you in all aspects of your training is what I think is the way forward.
Naomi, thank you. Can everybody still hear me? My computer's suddenly gone blank, but I'm hoping you can still hear me.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, great. So Rachel, on that one as well for yourself, is looking forwards, and it's a little bit following on from the question I think Jane's written, exciting goals for you, and what changes are you going to make to work towards your exciting goals?
So I think something that Naomi's just said is for for ordinary everyday runners, we all have our aspirations and we all have our places that we would like to go to with our running. And Jo mentioned earlier on that doesn't dissipate over time. You know, I still want to achieve certain things with my running. And one of the things that has helped me and is helping me now is having a coach, somebody who gives you the advice that perhaps you're certainly from a person who doesn't, you know, or certainly didn't know anything at all about running. Just to have somebody there who, for me, will pull me back rather than, I don't particularly need the motivation to do the sessions or to train. But what I do need is the structure, which helps me to it just helps me mentally to kind of pace where my week is at and what I'm doing on any given day. So having a coach and a plan really helps me, and it stops me from doing the silly things that I've done in the past, which you know, that it didn't turn out very well for that. And was there something about the running going forward? My goal this year has been, like I said, to run sub 3:30 at London and go back to Boston. That is my goal, and it hangs in the balance a little bit at the minute, but that's still where I'm at.
Perfect. Okay. And on that one, just moving forward, so we're into the summer now, and people have got this wonderful autumn opportunity coming up. Perhaps a question to all three of you. How about the autumn marathons and what training you'd be doing now and your top tips towards that about 12 weeks out? Jo, if I could bring you in on that one first.
Well, it's interesting hearing, you know, Naomi's been doing some speed work and speed sessions, because you know, it is great to get into a good 10k shape, you know, before you start your marathon build up. So if you're kind of getting into good 10k shape, say 12 weeks before, and
music to my ears, Jo, thank you.
So that's really good to do. And then I think for me, from experience, I mean, I've only really done a couple of marathons, but going into longer races, what I've found interesting from experience is that I really needed to work on, obviously, my long run. That became an important part of my training. And whereas before I just get through it and just run it, however, it became important to think about building it up, you know, week by week, going through the marathon training before tapering down again at the end. And that meant that I had to think about being ready to do that long run rather than getting through it, and also thinking about what pace I was doing. I think that was really important. So that took a lot of change in my training, but also the long tempo runs I was doing, like hour tempo runs, I found that really helpful. But interestingly, one time I had a few illness problems before doing a marathon, and I just kind of felt ill for ages and I couldn't really do the paces, and I kind of went for just, I'm still doing the time on my legs and hoping that would get me through. But actually I think it was still really important when I ran my better marathons, I was still keeping in check with some of my track sessions. Of course, my legs were tired and the times weren't as good, but if I kept some of the speed work in there, it definitely helped with making my marathon pace feel easier. So I think, you know, you're going into your marathon block, you're thinking about building up your long run each week, or sometimes you might only do your long run every sort of 10 days, just so that you can put in some of those more quality elements. But it's about you know, changing your training, getting that long run right, getting the long tempos right, but don't deny yourself all the sort of speed. I mean, not talking all out speed like 200s necessarily, but say sort of 400s off a very short recovery, so you're not blasting them, you're just keeping that pace there, or say some K reps, or say 10 times 800 or that type of thing. Because if you're keeping some really good leg speed, I found that then when you start your marathon, you feel like you're kind of waiting for the clock to go by, you're finding the pace comfortable. Whereas if you neglect that type of thing, like I did once, when the gun went, I felt like I was just pushing myself to the limit almost from the start. So you've got to keep, you can't just go from this, great, I've got into 10k and then get rid of that. You want to keep it there, but and then, you know, filter in all that specific marathon work, really.
Beautifully explained. Jo, while you're talking about it though, people are training at the moment in the summer. In theory, in the UK, it's going to get even hotter at some stage. we hope. And people are getting ready for autumn events. And training in the heat isn't easy, particularly if you've got to do long runs and everything as well. Now, you've done this before. You've been to countries where you've trained abroad and trained in the heat. What tips might you give people for coping with training in the heat, times of day for runs, and really getting ready for the autumn in that point of view? Because the autumn will be cooler, so that's the benefit at the end. The race will be cooler, but training in the heat.
I think obviously, you know, you said time of day, obviously you can go early morning or late at night. I think I've always found it easier to train for long road races during the summer, just because that extra amount of daylight I find helpful. You've got that more flexibility to fit your training in, because you want to do those longer runs and everything, and you've got more time to do a long run, or you've got more time to do a session than a recovery run. So that's a helpful side of it. I suppose as far as the heat, you've got to think about obviously nutrition, getting well hydrated beforehand, and making sure you've got electrolyte drinks during the run, and obviously fueling, like Naomi mentioned, you know, practicing that fueling you know, during the actual training is really important to keep hydrated. But yeah, choose cooler routes and everything as well, shadier routes. I notice when I run on canals, a big difference when you run under the trees. It makes a big difference how, when you're not in the real full heat of the sun, that really helps. But I don't think of it negatively. Like I say, definitely it's tough on race day. Like we had that hot London Marathon, and that made it really hard for people to run the times that they were capable of. But as far as training, you know, it does get you really, really fit. I found that if I'm training in hot conditions, my fitness is getting there much quicker than when I'm training in the winter. So there's benefits to it for that. But yeah, you do have to watch your hydration. It can be difficult to work out the strategies for hydration when you're training in different conditions to what you're doing for the race. You do have to bear that in mind. But yeah, early morning, late at night, hydrating, obviously clothing, making sure you're wearing you know, fabrics that wick away the sweat, that sort of thing. You can put a hat or sun hat and that, but I don't do that because I find that just keeps the heat in more. But a lot of people, especially in the States, seem to run in a cap to keep the sun off their head. But yeah, but go for it because it gets you fitter. But sorry, I haven't got coronavirus or something. People out at the school.
We've managed to go for the whole evening without mentioning that word, so let's pretend that.
Yeah, but yeah, I'd say the heat gets you quicker, so make the most of it, really.
Okay. Naomi, we'll let Jo grab some drink. The training you've been doing is now going to change a bit into your marathon prep. Do you want to talk about what your marathon prep looks like a little bit, and the key runs, the key sessions you do, and perhaps also what you enjoy doing within marathon training?
Yeah. You'll have to cut me off if I go on, because I could probably give you a 12-week rundown of what I hope to do.
We will shorten.
Yeah, so I guess firstly, for me now, my mileage will increase. I've probably been sitting around 80 to 90 miles-ish recently. So that will go, I'll start to push my mileage up to more of the kind of top end of my marathon block, it being more into the hundreds. The key thing there is really focusing on keeping all your easy runs easy between your sessions, because you do have to put the miles in, or I mean, in some people's cases it'll be cross training, but you do need to put that time in. But if you're really always pushing into that steady or zone, or just not allowing yourself to recover and keeping that heart rate low for the majority of your runs, the sessions are, you're not going to hit your paces and your sessions, and your fitness is going to plateau. So a lot of easy running on the cards, and then in between that, slightly longer sessions, so not quite as quick, but a lot of threshold work, maybe over some more miles, I hope, which is what I like to do. So probably a couple of key threshold sessions in the week, maybe a shorter one on a weekday, and then one that's kind of built into your long run as well, will be happening. Yeah, and as I kind of alluded to before, getting those long runs in where you're looking at, I guess, a couple of hours, 2.5 hours on your feet, mixing in the paces. So you're working at your marathon pace, you're working at a bit faster than your marathon pace, and then some easier stuff in there as well. And I guess the key thing for me with that is at this early stage where I'm set marathon pace or faster work, I look to do it by field. So I try and be true to myself. Okay, is this a pace that I could run 26 miles for today or this week when I'm doing that pace work? And then I kind of naturally let my fitness progress, so that towards kind of the more 6 weeks, 4 weeks out of the marathon, you're kind of hitting where you want to be for the race. Because if you go too hard too early and you're trying to really hit a pace that you've kind of plucked out of nowhere because it's a time that you might fancy, you can push yourself a bit too hard too early and actually not build into that marathon pace fitness. So yeah, a lot of training by field to begin with, and then I hope that it'll all click and come together for some big sessions in 6 weeks time.
Okay, very quickly, your favorite session and your favorite long run.
I would say I like doing 3 minutes on, 3 minutes off. So it might be like a 90-minute or 2-hour run with a kind of 10 to 12 mile block in the middle, where you're doing 3 miles probably a bit quicker than marathon pace, and then 3 miles a little bit slower than marathon pace. So it's not a super change in pace, but you're kind of going above and below that marathon effort.
3 miles or 3 minutes?
3 minutes.
3 minutes
above and below.
Right.
Favorite long run is the one where I do about a warm up and then 10k marathon pace, 10k steadier, 3k marathon pace, 3k steadier, and then maybe like a fast, 5k marathon pace, 5k easier, and then maybe like a fast 3k at the end. So you're kind of building up the paces in and out of easy in between.
So
and that'll be about 2
then.
miles or so. Yeah.
Okay, Rachel, putting you on your spot, your favorite type of training session, your favorite long run.
Okay, favorite type of session at the moment is any session, because I'm trying to get my iron levels up at the moment, and there's a few other issues I need to sort out. So I'm really looking forward to just being able to get into my training again properly. So I'd take anything at the moment. But traditionally, I've really enjoyed 5 lots of 5 minutes, speed work with 2 steady in between. I like that, as you can get a lot of work done in that session. It's quite economical with time. Long runs, I was doing quite a lot of sort of just 10-mile runs recently, up to a half marathon, but it seems such a long time since I've done actual marathon training. I've kind of drifted away from that now, so that's where the London Marathon seems a little bit too far out of reach for now. So fingers crossed I can get on some long runs pretty soon, but that's subject to improvement with iron levels.
Watch this space.
Yeah.
Jo, very quickly, your favorite session and your favorite type of long run.
Long run, I mean, at the moment I'm not doing long runs, but long run I like doing like an hour and then like a 20-minute tempo where I just sort of push myself really hard on a little bit tired legs, then 10-minute warm down. I suppose track sessions, I love 2x8x400 with a short recovery, so do 8 400s with 35 to 40 second recovery, trying to keep them at sort of 3k pace, well, between 3k and 5k pace, I suppose, and then 5-minute rest, then another 8. I also like sessions where I blast some quality reps, like say 1,000 8-6-4 with 3-minute recovery, but then do some tempo work, like 6 times 3 minutes off a minute, and just put my flats back on. But I mean, when I'm saying the distances, you can do these sessions just by time on a trail.
Just quickly, that last session, which is fantastic, just so 1,000 hard.
Yeah,
hard,
I've done those.
I've
done this session, you know, really close to a championship when I'm at a holding camp. It would be one of the ones that before I start the taper, really, the real taper. So I'm really trying to sharpen up, but then it's not voluminous enough because I'm not in my proper taper. So I'll do 1,000, but really full out, and then have 3 or 4 minute recovery, and then 800 totally full out, 600 totally full out, and then 400 totally full out. But they're like really blasting it. But then because I'd be preparing for 10k, it's not enough volume because I'm not in my proper taper, but I want that quality, but I've put my mind to that. So then I put my flats on and do 6 times 3 minutes off a minute, and actually it feels quite hard because you're really tired, and you get that sense of what it feels like at the end of a 10k when you've sort of, your breathing's hard and everything, but you just keep that going. You've got flats on in the outer lanes, you don't know how far you're running, but you just push yourself and then have another recovery. Then you know, I'll put my spikes back on. I say you don't need to put spikes on at all, obviously, if you don't want to, but this is what I did. And then I'll do a couple of 200s, not totally full out, but quick, just to finish like I'm doing a sprint finish, really.
And for those
and
of you
that useful.
For those of you that maybe think that session sounds a bit daft, remember a 10,000 meters, when you've got to win the race, is 25 laps, and you probably run your fastest lap at the end. So there's some real sense and logic in the way that session is structured. Fantastic.
I think also, sorry, just say also it cuts the injury risk down, because by having the volume of putting your flats back on and doing some unmeasured work, it's avoiding blasting too much and risking that injury as well, I think.
So look, on the subject of flats and shoes, Craig's come up with a question here on the Q&A. What advice would the panelists suggest for amateurs training on the road? I mean, I think this is really advice for everybody. What models would you wear? How do you rotate your shoes? What would you wear in terms of, I guess, mileage shoes, faster shoes? There's a hell of a range out there these days. Jo, go on.
Yeah, I mean, for mileage, obviously, you know, I love the Saucony Ride and the Saucony Triumph. I do the majority of my mileage in that, but I love doing a lot of trail running, which I'll use the Peregrine for, or the Exodus I absolutely love. And I find that the Exodus are great for dabbing onto trails, but also if you've got your run, it involves a bit of going out onto the road and back onto a trail. They're perfect for that because they've got even more cushioning. Obviously, I love the Endorphin series, the Endorphin Pro for getting out doing some road reps, the Endorphin Speed as well. And but I also like the A9, which I use for fast reps on the track because they're more like, you know, instead of a spike type thing in a way. So I use those. But I think it's important to rotate your shoes, wear different models. So you've got slightly different emphasis going through your foot. You know, when you're doing runs, I find that useful to keep a few pairs going that have got different attributes. Really, I think that helps with injury prevention, making sure you're thinking about what you're doing. Are you just getting some miles in, so you may as well have a bit more cushioning, or do you want to run at a quicker pace, so you want a shoe that's a bit more dynamic? And you know, you make those decisions. Definitely.
Rachel, what are you wearing?
I got very kindly sent a pair of Endorphin Speeds, and I love them. And I get a bit fixated in my head about once I like a running shoe, I stick to that. A bit like Jo with the trails, like the Peregrines, for running off road. But for me, the Endorphin Speeds are the shoes that I'm really enjoying running in at the moment, and I can't see me veering from that for a little while.
So she's got her dancing shoes on all the time. Naomi, I know you're wearing different shoes, but just describe roughly what you're wearing and how you do them.
Yeah, I'd agree with Jo that the key thing is finding shoes that you're comfortable wearing for the work that you've got to do. So I have shoes that I would wear for my easy runs that are probably quite a little bit clumpy, and I probably wouldn't want to go much quicker than like a 7-minute mile in, but I love wearing them just because they're super cushioned. And then that goes right through to your races that I would do my key sessions in. I have quite a range of brands at the moment. I've got obviously the Vaporflies, I've got the Endorphin Pro, I've got the Metaspeed. I'm loving trying quite a few different things out at the moment, but I think the key thing is just making sure you find something. It doesn't have to be like maybe necessarily what everyone else is on the start line saying, oh, you need this shoe or that shoe to run fast, because actually a lot of it is what you're conditioned to run in as well. And if you haven't kind of practiced in a shoe, or if it's going to be a bit severe for like on your calves or something, then that could be a problem in the race. So just try out a few different things, and make sure that you break in your shoes before your race in one of your bigger sessions, I guess, and yeah, switch them up until you find something that works.
Okay, brilliant, guys. I'm conscious of the time. It's been a fantastic evening, and we've covered a lot of things. So Hadiva, if am I allowed to ask the panel to give one final tip for everybody on here for their training?
Absolutely.
So Jo, if I could ask you first to give one final tip to everybody on here about either their training or racing in the months ahead.
Yeah, I think for me, over the years, I've learned the main thing is to prioritise the important aspects of training for your event, because sometimes your life is busy, you're trying to fit everything in, you might have work commitments, family commitments and everything. And if you just think, right, what's the main important things, and make sure you get them done, and then add everything back in, listen to your body on a daily basis, make those decisions so you've got your schedule there and it's planned, but you think of it as a flexible plan, because the main thing is the consistency. That's what's going to get you there in the end, and most of all, enjoy it and good luck.
Rachel, yourself?
Yeah, I'd say from very recent experience, if something doesn't feel right, just as Jo's mentioned, if just instinctively you feel as though something isn't quite right, I'd say get a blood test, get some advice, talk to someone who knows you know, a bit about, you know, what goes on. Use one of your phrases, Nick, underneath the bonnet, and it's really worth finding that out, because it might be something that's resolvable. And the final thing I'd say is remember why you run, remember why you do it in the first place, and you know, those two things together, you know, I can't see anything else I can add to, at this stage, I don't think.
Brilliant. Naomi?
Yeah, I'd say just give a thought to your fueling, both to make sure that you're fueling enough for the increase in your training, which you're probably bound to go through in the next few weeks, and also to your race day fueling. So if you're going to have something on the day of the race, practice it on your long runs, get up those 2 to 3 hours before, early in the morning, and actually do it to the time that you would do on race day. I think someone noted in the questions, what's the strangest thing you've eaten before a race? And like, I remember being abroad for a race, and the only thing I could find that I could eat was tacos. So I had them for the 4 meals for the 2 days prior. That's all I had. And I wouldn't recommend that. So yeah, just practice your race day breakfast and post race recovery as well in your training.
And learn from mistakes like eating tacos for 2 days. Yeah,
I still got a PB, so.
Oh, okay, well, there you go. There you go. So I know we've got a prize draw to do in just a second, but just a massive thank you to Saucony. If you haven't tried a Saucony shoe, please do. And I'm telling you now, if you get any of the Endorphin series on, you're probably going to struggle to take them off, which is going to be an issue in itself. But enjoy trying a Saucony shoe. And regarding Polar, all I would say to you all is recovery is so important. Your sleep is going to be so important towards any races you've got coming up. Tracking your data and understanding a bit more about your health to support your running. Use the device that's on your wrist to really, really help you with that in the weeks and the months going forwards to support your training. All of the guys on here do that brilliantly, either intuitively or through the science. And it's definitely come out tonight. A massive thank you to our 3 panelists, a massive thank you to Saucony and to Polar, and a big, big thank you obviously to Run and Become.
Just a big thanks to everybody for joining the conversation tonight. It was really fascinating, really interesting. Big thanks to our guest speakers. They've inspired us, they've shared their expertise, their experience, and it's been a lot of help. And a big thanks to Nick for bringing it all together. Always very inspiring, does a great job. So big thanks to Nick, and of course to Polar and Saucony as well. We wish you all the best with your running, and we've received so much inspiration from our guest speakers. So again, big thanks. And we look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.